two men, two faces that have completely taken over your For You page in the last few years, and one question that nobody in the comments can seem to agree on without starting a small war. Who is actually the better leading man? Not the more famous one, not the one with more Instagram followers. The better one. The one who actually makes you feel something when the camera holds on his face for 3 seconds too long. By the end of this video, I'm not going to tell you who wins, because honestly, I don't think there is a clean winner here, but I am going to break down exactly what each of these men brings to the screen that the other one doesn't. And I promise you, by the time we get to the end of this, you're going to have a much stronger opinion than you walked in with. So stick around, because the last category we're covering today is the one that actually decides this whole debate. And it's not the one you're expecting. Let's start at the very beginning, because how a career starts tells you almost everything about how an actor thinks about their own craft. Song Kang didn't explode overnight. He built his name slowly, one supporting role at a time, in things like Love Alarm and The Liar and His Lover, small parts that let him quietly prove he could hold a scene before anyone handed him a lead. And then Sweet Home happened, and suddenly the industry had to sit up and pay attention, because here was a guy who could carry an entire horror survival series on raw physical presence and quiet, wounded eyes without needing a single dramatic monologue to make you feel his character's grief. That's a hard thing to pull off. A lot of actors need dialogue to sell an emotion. Song Kang has built an entire reputation on selling emotion through stillness, through the exact right amount of tension in his jaw, through knowing when to just let the silence do the work. Byeon Woo-seok's path looks almost like the opposite story, at least on the surface. He spent years working steadily, some modeling, some smaller roles, patiently building a foundation most casual viewers never even noticed, and then Lovely Runner detonated across the internet like nothing this genre has seen in years. Overnight, and I mean genuinely overnight, an entire generation of viewers who had never heard his name before were suddenly obsessed, rewatching the same 3 scenes on loop, flooding timelines with edits, turning him into one of the fastest rising leading men this industry has produced in recent memory. That kind of explosive, near-instant global reaction is rare, and it says something specific about what he brings to a role, an ability to make an audience fall for a character so completely and so fast that it barely feels like a slow burn at all. So right away, you've got 2 completely different origin stories. One built like a marathon, patient, steady, proving himself scene by scene until the weight of an entire show could rest on his shoulders. The other built like a lightning strike, years of quiet groundwork suddenly paying off in one explosive, career-defining moment that the whole internet witnessed happening in real time. There's something worth sitting with in just how different those 2 paths feel from the outside looking in. When you build slowly, the way Song Kang did, you get the benefit of trial and error nobody's really watching closely. Small missteps that get quietly absorbed into a growing body of work instead of scrutinized under a microscope. By the time the spotlight actually turns fully onto you, you've already worked out a lot of your instincts in relative peace. That's a genuine advantage, even if it doesn't come with the same rush of overnight validation. Byeon Woo-seok didn't get that luxury. The moment Lovely Runner took off, every choice he made afterward was suddenly being picked apart in real time by an audience that had fallen instantly in love and now expected him to be perfect in every single follow-up decision. That's an enormous amount of pressure to carry, and it says something genuinely impressive that he's handled the sudden scrutiny with as much composure as he has, at least from what's visible publicly. Overnight fame has derailed plenty of careers before his, and so far, he's navigating it with a level head. And honestly, that difference in how they arrived is the first real clue into how differently they actually perform once they're there. Because what happens next, when we look at how each of them actually handles a role once the cameras are rolling, is where this debate gets a lot more interesting than just popularity contests and viral edits. Let's talk about range, because this is where fans on both sides get the most defensive, and honestly, both sides have a real case to make. Song Kang has quietly built one of the more versatile filmographies of his generation without most people even realizing it, because he moves between genres so smoothly that it almost doesn't register as versatility. It just feels like good casting every time. He can play the soft, hopeful romantic in Nevertheless, all wounded eyes and cautious hope, then turn around and play something colder and more dangerous, someone with real menace underneath the good looks, in a project like My Demon, and both performances feel completely lived in rather than like he's just wearing a different costume. That's the mark of an actor who understands that range isn't about doing something flashy and different every time. It's about finding the specific emotional truth of whatever character he's been handed and trusting the audience to feel the difference without him overplaying it. Byeon Woo-seok, by contrast, has had less time to build out a wide filmography simply because his breakout happened so recently. And that's a completely fair thing to acknowledge rather than pretend it isn't true. But what he's shown, even in a shorter body of work, is a rare ability to hold complicated, contradictory emotions in the same scene without it ever feeling messy or confused. In Lovely Runner specifically, he had to play a character carrying real trauma and grief underneath a surface that, for most of the show, needed to stay charming and grounded and quietly magnetic, and he pulled that balance off in a way that made every single small gesture feel loaded with meaning the audience wasn't fully told about yet. That kind of restraint, letting an audience feel that something heavier is sitting underneath a character without over-explaining it through dialogue, is genuinely difficult to do convincingly. And he did it as a lead in a breakout role, which is not something every young actor could pull off under that kind of sudden spotlight. So here's the honest tension in this category. Song Kang has the larger sample size, a filmography that proves he can move fluidly across genres and tones without losing his footing. Byeon Woo-seok has less volume to point to, but what he has shown in that one massive breakout performance suggests a depth of instinct that usually takes actors years longer to develop. Do you value the proven, tested versatility of someone who's already done the work across many roles? Or do you value the sheer instinctive talent of someone who walked into his first real spotlight and immediately looked like he belonged there? I don't think there's a wrong answer to that question, but I do think it's the first real fracture point in this whole debate, and it's going to come up again later in a way you're not expecting. So keep it in the back of your mind. There's another angle to this range conversation worth bringing up, and it's the question of risk. Song Kang's filmography shows an actor who has been willing to take on genuinely uncomfortable, less immediately likable material, characters who aren't always easy to root for, tones that swing dark without warning. That willingness to be less immediately charming in service of a role says something about how seriously he takes the craft over the image. Byeon Woo-seok, so far, has largely been asked to be magnetic and likable, which he's clearly extremely good at. But it does mean we haven't yet seen how he handles a role that requires him to be genuinely unlikable, morally complicated, or difficult to watch. That's not a knock against him. It's simply an open question that only time and future roles can answer. Now let's talk about something a little harder to define, but arguably even more important: presence. What happens the second either of these guys walks into a frame before a single line of dialogue has even been spoken? Song Kang has a specific kind of stillness to him on screen, a quiet, contained intensity that draws your eye without him needing to do anything overtly dramatic. Watch the way he holds a room in a scene where his character is simply listening to someone else talk. He doesn't perform reaction the way a lot of actors do, with big visible shifts in expression meant to signal to the audience exactly what to feel. He holds back, lets tension build in the small stuff, a held breath, a slight tightening around the eyes, and somehow that restraint makes the moment land harder than if he'd played it bigger. It's a very specific kind of screen presence, one built on control rather than magnetism in the traditional sense. And it works incredibly well for the kinds of brooding, emotionally guarded characters he tends to gravitate toward. Byeon Woo-seok's presence operates on a completely different frequency, and it's honestly part of why Lovely Runners spread the way it did. There's a warmth to him on screen, an openness in his expressions that invites the audience in rather than making them lean forward to catch a subtle shifts in restraint. When he smiles in a scene, it doesn't feel calculated. It feels like genuine, unguarded joy. And that quality is exactly what made an entire global audience fall for him so quickly. Where Song Kang draws you in through what he holds back, Byeon Woo-seok draws you in through what he lets you see fully and immediately. It's a rarer, harder thing to fake convincingly because audiences can usually tell the difference between performed charm and something that actually feels real coming through the screen. Think about the last time a single clip of an actor made you stop scrolling entirely, not because of the plot, not because of the editing, just because of the way he looked at someone. That's the specific effect Byeon Woo-seok has had on an enormous number of casual viewers who weren't even actively looking for a new K-drama obsession. It's an unusual kind of gravitational pull, and it's genuinely difficult to teach an actor how to have that if it isn't already somewhere in their natural instincts. If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, and I really hope you are because this one took a lot of thought to put together properly, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button right now before we get into the next part, because what's coming up is where this entire comparison gets genuinely difficult to call, and I don't want you to miss where we land on it. Let's talk chemistry. Because a leading man is rarely just judged in isolation. He's judged by how well he plays off the person standing across from him in every single scene. Song Kang has built a reputation for chemistry that feels lived in and comfortable rather than explosively electric. And that's not a criticism, it's a specific skill. Watch his scenes opposite his co-stars in Nevertheless or Sweet Home. And what you notice is a natural rhythm, an ease in how he reacts and adjusts to whoever he's playing against. Like the two actors have actually spent real time building trust with each other rather than just hitting marks. That kind of grounded, believable chemistry is exactly what sells a slow burn romance or a found family dynamic under crisis, because audiences need to believe these people have history together, even when the story hasn't shown us all of it yet. Byeon Woo-seok's chemistry, particularly in Lovely Runner, operates with a different kind of charge to it, something closer to that instant electric magnetism that makes an entire fan base start clipping GIFs within hours of an episode airing. There's an intensity to how he looks at his co-star in key scenes, a specificity in his physical choices, the exact way he reaches for her hand, the exact pause before he speaks that turns ordinary blocking into something that feels genuinely charged with unspoken feeling. That kind of chemistry is harder to manufacture through technique alone. It requires a specific kind of trust and instinct between two actors that either clicks or it doesn't. And when it clicks the way it did in that show, it becomes the exact thing that turns a good drama into a global phenomenon almost overnight. Here's where I want to pause and ask you something, because I genuinely want to know where you land on this. Which kind of chemistry actually keeps you watching longer? The slow, grounded, lived-in kind that rewards patience? Or the instant, electric kind that grabs you in a single scene and doesn't let go? Drop your answer in the comments, because I read every single one of them, and I want to see where this fan base actually splits. It's worth pointing out that both kinds of chemistry require real skill, even though only one of them tends to go viral in GIF form. The grounded, lived-in kind is honestly harder to sustain across an entire series because it has to hold up over 16 or 20 episodes without ever feeling repetitive or stale. The instant, electric kind has to prove it isn't just a flash in the pan, that the intensity can actually deepen and evolve as the story goes on, rather than burning out halfway through. Both of these men, in their respective standout roles, managed to pull off the harder version of their own specific style, which is exactly why both of them ended up becoming the center of this entire conversation in the first place. Now, let's get into something that doesn't get talked about enough when people debate leading men, and that's how each of them handles physicality and action versus quieter, more vulnerable romantic material, because the ability to do both convincingly is genuinely rare. Song Kang's work in Sweet Home showed a physical intensity that a lot of romantic leads simply don't get the chance to demonstrate. Real, grounded action work, believable exhaustion, a body language that sold genuine fear and survival instinct rather than just looking good while running from danger. That physical credibility carries over even into his softer roles, because there's always an undercurrent of contained strength to how he moves, which makes his quieter, more vulnerable moments hit harder by contrast. You can feel the restraint of someone who could be intense, but is choosing gentleness in this specific moment. Byeon Woo-seok hasn't had as many opportunities yet to show that same kind of physical, action-driven range, simply because his breakout role leaned more into charm and emotional nuance than physical intensity. But what he's demonstrated instead is an unusually mature handling of vulnerability for someone still this early in a leading man career, moments of genuine heartbreak that never tip into melodrama, a willingness to let a character look small and scared and uncertain without any vanity getting in the way of the performance. That's a different kind of bravery on screen, and it's just as rare as physical range, maybe more so, because it requires an actor to trust that stillness and softness can carry a scene just as powerfully as intensity can. So once again, we're looking at two genuinely different strengths rather than one actor simply being better than the other across the board. Song Kang has proven physical range that adds weight to his softer moments. Byeon Woo-seok has proven emotional bravery that suggests real potential for physical range once he gets the right role to show it. It's tempting to want a clean answer here, to just say one approach is objectively more impressive than the other, but that would honestly be selling both actors short. Physical intensity without emotional grounding just becomes empty action. Emotional vulnerability without any sense of physical presence can start to feel one note over a long series. What makes both of these men genuinely compelling leading men, rather than just good-looking faces cast well, is that they've each shown real command of the half of that equation they've had the chance to demonstrate so far. Let's talk industry momentum for a second, because this matters more than people give it credit for when debating who the better leading man actually is right now. Song Kang has had the advantage of time, several years now of steady, consistent output, letting him build a loyal, established fan base across multiple hit shows, a track record that studios and directors can point to when handing him bigger and riskier projects. That kind of consistency builds real industry trust, the kind that translates into better scripts, better directors, better opportunities down the line. Byeon Woo-seok is riding one of the most explosive momentum waves this industry has seen in recent memory, the kind of sudden global attention that completely reshapes an actor's career trajectory overnight. Every project he takes next is going to be watched incredibly closely by fans and by an industry trying to figure out whether Lovely Runner was lightning in a bottle or the start of something much bigger. That's a specific kind of pressure Song Kang doesn't currently have to deal with in the same way, because his career has already proven its staying power. Byeon Woo-seok still has to prove his moment wasn't just a moment. There is a version of this story where 5 years from now, we look back and Byeon Woo-seok has built a filmography just as deep and varied as Song Kang's, and this entire debate becomes a footnote about how far he's come since that first breakout role. There's also a version where the pressure of that sudden spotlight makes it harder for him to find roles that don't just lean on the same charm that made him famous in the first place, which is a trap plenty of overnight sensations have fallen into before him. Which version actually happens depends entirely on the choices he makes next, the roles he says yes to, and whether he's willing to risk being less immediately likable in service of proving he has real range beyond that one incredible performance. And that brings us to the actual verdict, the part I promised you at the very beginning of this video, the part that's going to decide where this whole debate lands. Here's my honest take. If you're judging based on proven range, consistency, and the ability to disappear completely into wildly different characters across a growing body of work, Song Kang has the stronger overall case right now. He simply had more time and more roles to demonstrate exactly how versatile he actually is, and every single one of those roles has backed up the claim. But if you're judging based on sheer, undeniable screen presence, that specific quality that makes an entire global audience fall in love with a character in real time, Byeon Woo-seok might actually have the more remarkable achievement, because doing that once, this early, this fast, this completely, is a rarer thing than most people realize. Plenty of talented actors work for years and never once create a moment like that. So who's actually better? Honestly, I think that depends entirely on what you personally value more in a leading man, proven, tested range built over years, or raw, instinctive magnetism that announces itself instantly and completely. I have my own opinion, and I'll be honest, it shifted twice while I was actually putting this video together, which tells you exactly how close this comparison really is. What I keep coming back to is this. Song Kang represents what happens when talent gets the time and patience to fully mature in public view, one steady role at a time, until an audience trusts him completely, no matter what genre he steps into next. Byeon Woo-seok represents something rarer and, honestly, a little harder to explain. That occasional, almost accidental alignment of the right actor, the right character, and the right moment, colliding all at once into something that reshapes an entire career overnight. Neither of those paths is more legitimate than the other. They're just different answers to the same question of what makes someone worth watching. But I want to hear yours. Tell me in the comments who you think actually wins this, and don't hold back, because this is exactly the kind of debate this channel exists for. If you made it all the way to the end of this one, thank you genuinely, because I know this was a longer, deeper breakdown than usual, and I wanted to actually do this comparison justice instead of rushing it. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because I've got a lot more of these breakdowns coming, and I don't want you missing a single one. I'll see you in the next video.